as well as Facebook. We are live. Wonderful. Live on YouTube and live on Facebook. Good morning, Stephanie. Good morning, Daniel. Stephanie, got your comment right there. Daniel, I see you. And Marty. Good morning, Marty. Yashikoch. Just trying to post this link. Some people are asking on exactly where the link is on YouTube. We are almost at the amount of YouTube subscribers that we need to be able to have our own link. Right now, we have a very strange, awkward link for YouTube. And if you could just subscribe to our YouTube link, that would be very, very helpful to allow us to Brandon, there you are. Okay, good. To allow us to find our own link. It's going to be youtube.com/Jewish Gardens. But until we hit 100 subscribers, the YouTube will not allow us to do that. So I just did post the link on Facebook, and I'm trying to work out how to do that on social media just before we begin. Just a quick second here. I'm waiting for the link to populate. It didn't. Bit of a one-man show here. 1 second. I think this is the link. I'm going to post it to YouTube. 1 second. To social media. Here it is. Okay. Another 30 seconds or so. Another 30 seconds or so. Another 30 seconds or so. Another 30 seconds. Sorry. Okay. Okay. Posting. Okay, good. That was posted. And one more post before we begin. I'm going to post it to another group. Okay, good. We are live and ready to roll on YouTube and on Facebook. If you are with me, Mr. Grapefruit Drink, nice to see you. Not sure who you are. I like your name, Grapefruit Drink. It's one of my favorite fruits, so good to see you. And thank you for joining us for Torah study here on YouTube and on Facebook. Let's do this, guys. Let's get into it. We're going to keep an eye on the clock, so we're going to try to make sure. I want to respect your time that because you showed up here to study Torah with me, I want to make sure that I respect your time as well. We're going to do this in 25-minute sessions. I'm going to try my best to stick to 25 minutes to finish this session of fear and anxiety, conquering fear and anxiety, as well as Talmud by 9:30, and then I want to go straight into Jewish spirituality and meditation. By 10 o'clock, we should be done. That way, you come in, you come out. It's 25-minute sessions times 3 every morning here of quarantine, and we can get something really powerful to start our day with souls on fire. So thank you for joining me here. Nicole, great to see you with us. Hi, Nicole. Good morning and welcome. Wow, what a nice surprise. We are studying the Jewish approach to fear and anxiety. We're surrounded in strange, difficult, challenging times today where the mass media is sowing hysteria, and it's difficult to differentiate between what's really legitimate concern and what is sensationalism and hysteria. The main thing we need to know is that our blessing, our salvation comes not from the cable news. It doesn't come from the CDC or from any government agency. Our sustenance and blessing comes from God. And that's what's so important about the doctrine of blind trust. I want to remind you of what is the doctrine of blind trust before we proceed further into the Jewish approach to conquering fear and anxiety. The doctrine goes as follows: that God treats us the way we treat him. God is a mirror image to us. How we initiate the relationship is exactly how God reciprocates that relationship. Good morning, Mickey. And therefore, when we initiate the relationship with God, which is one of blind trust. Blind trust means I trust in God without calculating. Without Blind trust means I trust in God without calculating whether God is strong enough to solve this massive problem that we're facing globally or personally. When I initiate a relationship with God, which is blind trust, then God reciprocates that relationship by granting me blind blessing, which means blessing me, blessing me with the outcome that I need blindly without looking into whether I deserve it or not. My blind trust in and of itself is what draws and causes the blind blessing. Hence the term coined by the Rebbes, the Chabad Rebbes, which is tracht gut wird sein gut, think good and therefore it will be good. In the merit of thinking good doesn't just mean positive thinking. It means trusting blindly in God's almighty benevolence. Thinking good, that will cause that it will be good, notwithstanding your spiritual, religious, or any other standing. Whether you believe or don't believe, if you keep Shabbos or not, it doesn't matter. This is an override switch. And I want to welcome on YouTube, Mr. Grapefruit Drink. I see that you are ordered the book. That's great. This is the book that Mr. Grapefruit is talking about. Duties of the Heart by Feldheim Publishers. That's what we're studying. Highly encourage you to buy this book on on Amazon. Might take a few days, but definitely a very worthwhile investment. 2-volume book, Duties of the Heart by Feldheim Publishers. And Deborah, good morning, Deborah. I'm glad that you are enjoying the Duties of the Heart study. On Facebook, I'm not seeing any other comments. Richard Greenspan joined us and Ari Raz. Good morning, shalom, welcome, and we are moving forward. Now that we've established the doctrine of trust, let's get into the details. So if you do have the book, we are in the middle of at the top of page 361 of the Gates of Trust. This is about 120-page work. We're going to work through this one page at a time throughout the quarantine and maybe beyond. Hopefully it's going to be over in no time. Back to business. I hear the economy is doing better, which is, thank God, l'chaim, amazing. Keep it up. And we should all just cruise from here into Mashiach. It's just so interesting, that I was just talking to my father in South Africa moments ago, and he was telling me that starting this evening, they're enforcing a mandatory quarantine across the entire country of South Africa. I think it's like 40 million people. Until the end of Pesach, the last day, the 8th day of Pesach. That's April 16th. And what's so interesting is that in the first Passover, 3,312 years ago, in the year 1313 BCE, the Jewish people were forced to observe Passover in their own homes. The verse says, "V'atem al teitzu ish mipetach beito ad boker," and you shall not leave, each man shall not leave the entrance of his home until morning. Whilst there was a plague going on outside, that was the plague of the death of the firstborn, the 10th plague in Egypt. God was passing over the Jewish homes while we were stuck in our homes. There's like biblical undertones here. God willing, we should go from this quarantine into the arrival of Mashiach, which is an era of higher consciousness. The coming of Mashiach, in the words of Isaiah the prophet, the glory of God will be revealed, and all physical flesh will see that the word of God has spoken. Can you imagine reaching a state of enlightened consciousness, God willing, today, with the arrival of Mashiach? It's so beautiful. I can't wait. Folks, do share your comments. I'm excited to talk to you, share with you. It's a little lonely during this time of quarantine, and it's so awesome always to get your comments. We're going to stick this to a strict time limit. We'll be done this and Talmud by 9:30. So let's do this so that way I can respect your time and you can go on with whatever plans you plan for the day. Back to page 361, top of the page in this book, Duties of the Heart. We're in the section called the Gates of Trust. Another advantage to the person who trusts in God, this is such a beautiful way to live your life, is that one who trusts in God is not hindered in his trust by wealth. For he does not rely on money. Rather, he regards it as a deposit. We did this a little bit yesterday. I'm going to do it again because it was so powerful. Rather, he regards his money as a deposit which he has been commanded to use in certain ways and for certain purposes for a limited amount of time. Your relationship with money is a perfect litmus test. Good morning, Harvey. I miss you, my friend. Wow. So good. A blast from the past. So good to see you. Your relationship with money is the perfect litmus test as to the status of your relationship with God. You see, we all believe in something. If you don't believe in God, then you believe in money, or you believe in your car, or you believe in your other status symbols or identity enhancers, as a good friend of mine, Barry, likes to say. He might be here in the vicinity of in the zone of virtual Torah study today. How many of us look to money as our God? Now, when I say that money is our God, I want you to think about it this way. Just think about it. When something is your God, it doesn't mean that you pray to it. It means that you're willing to go out of your way for it, and that you'll forfeit other parts of your life for it. For example, so as a believer, as a Jew who believes in God, I hope, I'm willing to forego money for God. So if somebody offered me $1 million, as this actually happened when we were building our shul, in order to remove the mechitza, the men and women divider in our shul, I said, sorry, I can't do that because, my God opposes it. I can't take down a mechitza for $1 million, right? If somebody offers me, I don't know, a meeting with somebody very important on Shabbos, I can't go. It's Shabbos, right? So my Shabbos comes first. But if your money is your God, then it means that you'll forego your God for money, or you'll forego your marriage for money, or you might forego your kids for money. Think about that for a second. Just think about that for a second. How many of us will throw our kids under the bus for the sake of money? There's a very peculiar law in Torah. It's called the law of the redemption of the firstborn. The law of the redemption of the firstborn. What it means is that if it's a biblical commandment, that it's all connected to Passover, by the way, because Passover is when God passed over the Jewish homes while he was inflicting the plague upon the firstborn of the Egyptians, right? So when the Egyptian firstborns were afflicted, God saved and protected the Jewish firstborns, right? Because of that, the Jewish firstborns are forever indebted to God, forever. Because he saved them, they should have been killed then in Egypt. And because they weren't killed, therefore, God is, they literally owe their lives to God. So what that means is, on a practical level, that on the morning of the Passover Seder, the firstborns of all Jewish homes have to fast because God should have killed them on that day and they didn't, so they fast. Another thing that the firstborns do is that when a firstborn is born, you're supposed to bring him to a priest. And in a ritual called a pidyon haben, a redemption of the firstborn, you bring him to the priest, and the priest asks the question. He says to you, look, a firstborn was born to you and he's consecrated to God. Would you like to keep the boy? Or would you like to give the boy to God, or would you like to redeem him for 5 shekels, for 5 silver shekels? Basically, he's asking, do you want the boy or do you want the money? Now, I don't think any human being in the history of the world ever said, yeah, I think I'll keep the 5 shekels, you keep the boy, especially if it's your firstborn. But the question seems so shallow. It's such a weird question. I mean, how is it that we're doing this whole ritual out of a firstborn? I mean, is this a joke? What's going on over here? I mean, why would you even ask such a question? Do you want the baby or do you want the money? But in reality, if you think about it, what happens when that boy, fast forward 10 years, 5 years, the boy says, tugging at your sleeve, and he says, Daddy, please can you play a game with me? And what do? You pull out your phone and you're like, oh, not now, I'm busy now. And he comes back to you the next day. And he says, Daddy, can we go play catch? And you're busy again on your cell phone. And it's all in the name of money, because you're making money, you're supporting the family, you're taking care of him, you're really loving him in a way that he doesn't even understand. But really, you're not. Really, it's all about you, it's all about money, and the boy is out the window. And that's really the big question over here. Who is your God? Who is your highest allegiance to? Is it to God? Is it to money? Is it to your children? Is it to your wife? And that's a big question we have to ask ourselves. So when it comes to trust in God, what the gates of trust here is telling us is that we've got to be very, very, very cognizant of our relationship with money. Many of us have a relationship with money which is like very attached to money. As a rabbi who runs a Chabad house, I can tell you that I meet with a lot of people that, I have to talk to them about money, about getting engaged with the Jewish community and supporting the Jewish community. Some people have a very, very smooth relationship with money. They have no problem like making donations. Other people, it doesn't matter how much money they have, by the way, it's irrelevant. Some people just are very, very attached to their money, and they have a very hard time giving away $10. And it's just fascinating when you look at people and you see their relationship with money. So it's got a lot to do with who your trust is in. If your trust is in God, the money is just a deposit. But if you don't really trust in God and you're holding on to your money, that's what makes you who you are. That's what gives you a sense of security, a sense of identity. That how can you possibly give that away? And that's what he's pointing out to us this morning in the gates of trust. Someone who trusts in God knows that the money all comes from God. All my blessing, every single thing that I have comes from God. God gives me what I need. He gives it to me when I need it. And when there's a door that doesn't open before me, it's because what's behind that door is not meant for me. It's not good for me. So you don't get attached to your money. The money's just a vehicle, a tool to help you operate in this world. But you don't get emotionally invested in your money because you're trusting in God, right? And how this expresses itself in a very, very practical way is when you give it away. When you give away money to charity, do you expect the whole world to bow before you? Do you expect the recipient of the charity, of the gift, to bow down before you and to kiss your toes? Or do you say, look, it was just a deposit with me and I'm the trustee, so don't get excited. I gave the money. I did my obligation. Let's move on. You don't have to praise me until the cows come home. It's okay. You know what I mean? It's very interesting when you see when people give a gift, give a charity, how what kind of admiration they need. Obviously, everybody needs to be thanked and appreciated and validated because everybody, at the end of the day, if they gave the gift to a certain cause and not to another, then you've got to exhibit gratitude and validate their choice and their confidence in you. But the question is, in and of yourself as the giver, how attached are you to the money? How attached are you to the praise that follows the money? Do you consider yourself a trustee of God's benevolence, or do you consider yourself an incredibly kind person giving to the undeserving from your hard-earned wealth what is really yours and not belonging to anybody else? So that's an interesting point, and let's look at it in the words of the gates of trust. So rather, God's deposit it as a deposit. The money as a deposit, which has been commanded. He has been commanded to use in certain ways and for certain purposes, and for a limited amount of time. It's not yours forever. If it stays at length in his possession, he does not, on its account, become arrogant. He doesn't remind the recipients of his charity of the kindness he rendered to them, for he was only performing his duty. He does not wish to be thanked and praised for his kindness, but thanks the Creator may be exalted for having made him an agent of kindness. I'm trying to point out a quick story here. You're supposed to give to charity. You're supposed to give a tithe to charity. I want to welcome my friend Peony Super from Melbourne, Australia. He runs the Chabad of young people in Melbourne, Australia. Great to have you here, Peony. I remember you studying with me about 20 years ago. Good to have you with us, my friend. Good. So I want to just point out to you that, God is in a partnership with us when it comes to money. And he's always testing us. God wants you to give 10% of your gross income to tzedakah. If you do that, he continues to give you more, and he's going to test you more and more. It's constantly being tested. When I was 13 years old, I was making 100 South African rand a week from the jobs that I was doing. I would give 10 rand each week away and to charity, and I was like, I felt amazing. It was like an incredible experience. And the more I gave, the more I made. The more I made, the more I gave. It was a vicious cycle, a very positive vicious cycle. It was beautiful, a very good experience, and it's something which I continue to do to this very day. The more I make, the more I give. There's a great story of a guy who was a simple shopkeeper in Tel Aviv, and he made money. I think he was a shoemaker or whatever he was. He every time he got paid, he removed 10% and he gave it to charity. And slowly but surely, he got a little bit bigger, and he bought the store next door, and he bought another store, and he became pretty massive in Israel. Became one of the wealthiest people in Israel, as he owned stores in various cities, and he owned real estate, and he bought gas stations. He was really an entrepreneur, but he made so much money. He was making millions and millions and millions of shekels that by now his financial advisors got involved. They said, maybe you shouldn't give 10%. Maybe you could be a little more sophisticated about this, about how you give your charity. And basically, long story short, he stopped giving his 10%. he stopped giving his 10%. So very quickly, things started going downhill. He started getting an environmental problem in this place and a zoning problem in that place and protesting here and some other government issue problem and on and on. He started getting all sorts of problems. Eventually he came to his rabbi and he was like, look, Rabbi, what happened to me? What did I do to deserve this? And the rabbi, who knew him from the very beginning, he said, listen, in the beginning, you were a good trustee. You gave away 10% to charity religiously, no matter what, no questions asked. God saw that you were a good partner. So the more that you gave to charity, 10%, the more that God said, okay, I'll give you more and more and more. But when God saw that you stopped giving away 10% to charity, he said, no, you're a weak partner. You've lost your magic touch. And now he has to find someone else to deposit his money with, to see someone else that could be a worthy trustee. If you're not going to be a worthy trustee, that he's going to have to find someone else. And that's the essence of our relationship with money as it pertains to the Jewish approach to fear and anxiety and the doctrine of blind trust. When you have trust in God, then money is but a tool. When you realize that money is but a tool, it manifests itself in the way and the measure in which you give charity. Very, very powerful litmus test. Continuing in the book, if he loses his money, he won't grieve or mourn its absence. Rather, he thanks God when the deposit is collected, just as he thanks him when it was first given to him. He rejoices in his portion. Remember, who is wealthy? He who is happy with his lot. That's what it means to be wealthy. He's not, he doesn't have a bottomless appetite, insatiable appetite, because he knows that the money comes from God. My loyalty and allegiance and reliance is on God. It's not on money. God defines me, not my money. My money is just a tool. He doesn't get excited overly about his money. He rejoices in his portion. He doesn't seek to injure anyone, and he doesn't covet anyone's property. It's another very powerful defining factor. Are you envious of other people's possession? If only I had that car, if only I had that wife, if only I had that house, if only I had that job. You don't have that problem, because when you trust in God, your life is beautiful. I have what I need. I have it when I need it. I have it where I need it. I'm not worried. I'm not stressed out. That's the beauty of the doctrine of trust. The one that trusts in God is never stressed out. There was a beautiful video, which I wish I could share with you right now. I saw it this morning. I don't want to mention his name, even though it is famous. There's a big rabbi in Jerusalem whose sons came to the Rebbe, and I wonder if I can show you the video right here on the screen. His sons came to the Rebbe. It's about a 10-second video, but I think I can show it to you right now. Let me see if I can. His sons came to the Rebbe, and they asked the Rebbe for a blessing for their father. For a blessing for their father, because he was always worried. He was very, very worried about things. Oh yeah, I hope I could find it. He was very worried about all sorts of stuff. So the Rebbe's blessing to them was as follows. Here's what the Rebbe said. Oh no, I think I know where it was. Hold on. Here's where it was. Here. Okay. So I'm gonna see if I can play it for you on the screen. Oh no, it's in English. It's in Hebrew. I'm sorry. It's in English. It's in Hebrew. The subtitles are in Hebrew. I'm just explaining to you. The guy comes to the Rebbe and he says, a blessing of my father. My father's very, very worried. He's always stressed about money. And he's a big rabbi. So the Rebbe said, what is he worried? Tell him, I'm watching it right now, he shouldn't have worries. Why should he not have worries? Because worries can only ruin his blessing. If he has strong trust in God, he won't have worries. And strong trust in God will bring him the blessing that he needs. Remember, the doctrine of blind trust is to the exclusion of anxiety. If you have anxiety, it means you don't have blind trust. If you have a shred of anxiety, it means you don't have blind trust. But when you have blind trust in God, when you're not worried, that's when God showers the blessing upon you. So that's the message over here. He rejoices in his portion. He doesn't seek to injure anyone. He doesn't covet anyone else's property. As the wise man said, a righteous man eats only until he is satisfied. That is what is the trusting man's relationship with money. He doesn't let it faze him. Let's go just a little bit further over here. I'm in the middle of 361. Trust in God brings happiness and joy. Among the benefits of trust in God in this world are the following: a heart at rest, free of worldly cares, a tranquil spirit, undisturbed and untroubled by lack of bodily gratification, a sense of calm, security, and peace, as it says in Jeremiah. Blessed is the man who trusts in God. God will be his refuge. He is like a tree planted by water that sends out its roots by the stream. Remember, you're connected to the most powerful entity on the face of the earth in the history of the world, God Almighty. You don't have anything to worry about. Your worry is a slap in the face to God that is showering you with all this tremendous blessing. Don't slap God in the face, because if you do, you're going to offend God. So don't do that. When you trust in God, when you're joyous, when you're happy, that's when God says, oh, here's a guy that trusts in me. I'm going to shower him with blessing. That's the doctrine. Another advantage is the soul's release from the need to set out on long journeys. Interesting. You don't need to set out on long journeys which consume the body and shortens one's life. As it says, he weakened my strength on the way. He shortened my days. Why don't you have to go on long journeys? The story is told of one of the ascetics who, before he began the practice of asceticism, traveled to a distant land in search of livelihood. He thought that the source of his money lies in a distant land. He didn't realize the source of his money lies with God. So he traveled very far in a dangerous journey to go find the money that he needed. He met one of the idolaters in the city to which he had traveled, and he said to him, how utterly blind and lacking in understanding you are to worship idols. So he said to the idol worshiper, you're so foolish, you're so myopic if you're worshiping idols. I mean, how could you possibly worship idols? But listen now to what the idolater responds to him. Idolater responds, he says, and what do you worship? Asked the idolater. Can you imagine? The idolater says to the so-called believer in God, he said, what do you worship? He says, I worship the omnipotent creator, the one provider and supporter. There is nothing like him. The idolater said to him, your actions contradict your words. How so? If that were true, said the idolater, he would have provided you with a livelihood in your own city as he does here. Why would you need to come so far here to get your livelihood? The fact that you came here means that you don't believe in God. And you would have not gone to the trouble of traveling to a distant land such as this one. Unable to reply, he returned home to his land, assumed an ascetic regimen, and never again left the city. Very powerful meditation there, to realize that if you're trusting in God, then you don't need to get stressed out about the origin of your livelihood. You know that the origin of your livelihood is through God. And there's a lot to talk about that. I think I'm going to try to continue that conversation tomorrow. I'm going to try to wrap this up over here. Again, folks, if you have any comments, questions, critique, or anything to input, please do interject. I would love to hear your comments here on Facebook or on YouTube Live. Either one would be a really nice place to hear from you. And, oh, I know who Mr. Grapefruit is. That's nice. Good. Okay, nice to see you there, Brandon. And, okay, if anybody's texting me on my phone, I just want to let you know that it's hard for me to focus on my phone while I'm teaching Torah because I don't want to be distracted. So here I am, I'm back with you, and we're studying, moving on to Hayom Yom, which is a book that the Rebbe published. It means from day to day. The Rebbe wrote this book in the year 1943, a message for each day. We study it every single day because it's got a message, a spiritual message for every single day of the year. It's a very powerful concept that we Chabadniks believe that within the day that the Rebbe chose to give a certain teaching, it's connected to the message of that particular day, every year. I see Daniel is asking the name of the book. I'm not sure if you're asking about this book, Duties of the Heart, by Feldheim Publishers. It's a 2-volume set. Or if you're asking about the next book, which is this one, From Day to Day, Hayom Yom, published by Kehot Online Publications. Anyways, here we are. Today is actually Rosh Chodesh. Today is the beginning of the month of Passover. It's the beginning of the month of Nisan, the month of miracles. We're moving from the month of Purim, of Adar, the month of joy, into the month of Nisan, which is the month of miracles. May we all experience extraordinary miracles with our health and wellness and prosperity. All the blessings that we need from God right now at this time with the eradication of this virus. Let us move on to Hayom Yom. So the Hayom Yom reads as follows. We're down to one Hayom Yom because there's only 1 month. Last month was a double month because of leap years sometimes. But now we're moving on into Yom Yom. We don't say Tachnun all month, so there's no. This is a month which is filled with joy. There's no supplications in our prayers. Every day we recite a Nasi prayer, which basically means that in temple times, in the tabernacle times, in the desert, when the Jewish people built the tabernacle with Moses, the head of each tribe brought a consecration offering on behalf of his tribe every day of the first 12 days of this month. And therefore, in commemoration of that, we read a special paragraph relating to the president of each tribe. And we actually say, if my soul is from that tribe, there's 12 tribes of Israel, if my soul is from the tribe that offered the consecration offering today, then may be considered as if I did that as well. So the Hayom Yom goes as follows. After saying the Nasi, the presidential offering of the day, we say the Yiratzon, which is printed in Torah or Sidur, Kohanim and Levim also say. My father instructed his brother-in-law, Rebbe Moshe Herdenstein, who was a Kohen, to say Yiratzon after the Nasi, noting that even a Kohen Levi must say it, for it is related to Ibur. Basically, what this means is like this. The concept means that there's 12 tribes of Israel. But if you're a Kohen or a Levi, it means you're definitely coming from the tribe of Levi. Now, the way we do the Nasi blessing is that we say, if my soul comes from this tribe of Zevulun or Reuven or Shimon, then may it be considered as if today I brought my offering together with my president. But if you're from the tribe of Levi, if you're a Kohen or a Levi, and you're definitely from the tribe of Levi, then why would you need to say, if my soul comes from this other tribe? Why would you need to say that? You know that you're from the tribe of Levi. So today's Yom Yom says that because all souls are interconnected, every single Jew is responsible for every other Jew. We're interrelated. Therefore, even a Kohen who knows his tribal ancestry to this day is still obligated to say that same prayer, to say that if my soul is related to this tribe or that tribe, then may be considered as if my soul brought the offering, because we're all connected. And now we continue with the study of Talmud. We're moving to our daily regimen of Talmud study. Again, we're going to try to keep this down to a minimum of a maximum of 25 minutes. We're going to try to end it at 9:30, so that way to plan your day. We start at 8:30. We're doing 3 sessions of Torah study. The first is fear and anxiety conquering. The second one is Talmud. The third one is Introduction to Jewish Spirituality and Meditation. 3 sessions, 25 minutes each. You know what you're in for. You know how long it's going to take, and there's a beginning and a clear ending, so that it doesn't have to be endless, and we can have a more of a focused regimen of Torah study. Okay, let's do this. So we're continuing on in the Talmud. We're studying a new section on page 75. If you do have the book, this is by Otzgrol Publications. It's called the Ein Yaakov. Also encouraging you to buy this book online. We're starting a new paragraph 20 on page 75. The Gemara continues its discussion of the importance that we must show to prayer. The Gemara continues. Rabbi Chelbo said, in the name of Rav Huna, whoever sets a specific place for his prayer, that is, if he always prays in the same place, the God of Abraham, our forefather, will help him as he helped Abraham. And when he dies, they will say about him, woe for the loss of this humble person, woe for the loss of this pious person, who was from the students of Abraham, our forefather, who designated a special place for prayer. And from where do we know that Abraham, our forefather, set a place for prayer? For it is written, Vayashkem Avraham baboker el hamakom asher amad sham et pnei Hashem. Avraham arose early in the morning to the place where he had stood before God. He went back to the same place where he had stood before God. Avraham went to the place where he had stood a day earlier, pleading with God not to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, as described there in Genesis. And standing in this verse to the place where he had stood means nothing other than prayer. We see the term standing to clearly refer to standing before God, as it states elsewhere in Torah. And Pinchas stood and prayed. This is in Psalms 106. In Torah, the verbiage is very precise. When an expression is used in one context, it applies to all other contexts as well. So when it says by Pinchas that he stood and prayed, we understand that standing means prayed. So every time we see standing, it means also prayed. So we see that Avram went to pray in the same place that he had prayed previously, that is, in the place that he had set for prayer. Now, this is very interesting because, here we are during this quarantine where we normally daven every day at 7:30 in the morning. We come together at shul, we daven together, and it's very important to have what's called a makom kavua, a set place. When you come to shul, you should always sit in the same seat. every time you come, you shouldn't say, oh, well, today I'm going to sit here, today I'm going to sit there, today I'm going to sit in the talking section, the non-talking section, in the smoking section, and the lawyer section. Today I'm going to sit where I can see my wife. Today I'm going to sit where I can't see my wife. You shouldn't jump around like that. Every day in the same place, because a makam kavua, a established place, is very powerful for your connection with God, as we just saw in the Talmud, and we're going to explain it in just a few short moments. This is why some Jews get very offended when they come to shul and they see somebody else already sitting in their seat. So, that they get like really mad. And I want to tell those people that, if somebody's sitting in your seat, more important than your connection with God, by erupting with anger about somebody who's sitting in your seat, more important than that is showing God that you love God's children by being kind to the Jew who's sitting in your seat and sitting next to him. So that's just an interesting little point to point out of there. But during quarantine, here we are. Good morning, Hannah and Andy. Here where we are, we're sitting in quarantine, quasi-quarantine. I have to tell you, it's very unsettling for me to daven, not always at exactly the same time, and not always. Sometimes I'm davening at home, sometimes I'm davening at shul. It's a little unsettling. I can see the wisdom of davening at the same time and at the same place every single day. It's certainly very helpful. But I want to say to you that even when you're in quarantine and you're at home, I want you to designate a place in your home, which is the place of your daily prayer. Take a corner, a room, something in your house, which is the place where you daven regularly. And that way you can focus your prayer. Even if you're not coming to shul, you have a place, which is the place of your davening. In my home, I have an office. I have a corner of the office, which has a stender, which is a place that it's like a lectern. When I daven in that spot. Otherwise, it's always a novel experience. When you're in the same place, when you're familiarizing yourself with the place where you daven, you can focus more easily on the meditation that you're supposed to be thinking about when you're davening. So that's an important concept. Now let's go a little bit deeper into it. But the one thing that I want to establish is the importance of having a makom kavua. I'm just going to plug in this computer before it dies. Give me a quick second here. Okay, there we go. Plugged it in. We are live. Let's talk about the importance of having a set place for davening. So the note here continues, a place for prayer. Why is designating a place, a set place for praying, so important? On a simple level, the Talmudic commentary Rashba explains that a person who prays must first focus his mind on the one to whom he is praying and be cognizant of his own lowliness and the exalted greatness of the one he petitions. A designated place for serving God aids in focusing one's mind in this way. It basically allows you to be humble, because if you're always davening in a different place, the weather, the draft, the air conditioning, the noise, it can be very distracting. But when you're in the same place, you develop a routine and you're able to get into the zone of davening. So that seems to be on a basic level the reason why it's so important to to daven in the same place. But the Maharal of Prague, if you've ever been to Prague and you've been to the old New Shul, the Alt Neu Shul. Good morning, Susan. Lovely to have you with us. If you've been to the Alt Neu Shul, which is the old New Shul in Prague, it's the one synagogue that the Nazis didn't destroy because they figured this was going to be the one that was going to be the museum for Judaism, for the extinct, God forbid, religion, race of the Judaism. That's why they kept this beautiful synagogue alive. It's the Maharal of Prague synagogue, and the legend goes that during the Middle Ages, when there were many blood libels, he lived in the 1500s, there were many blood libels against the Jewish people, which were accusations, false accusations, that the Jews were baking Christian blood into the matzah. Think about that. It happened just before Passover. What happened was that there was this rumor, propaganda, that the Jewish people were killing a Christian kid in order to bake his blood into matzah. And therefore, the verdict was out even before the trial. They decided to annihilate entire villages of Jewish people, God forbid. Before Passover was a very, very scary time. In fact, one of the origins for this is because the bread of communion, which somehow is supposed to represent, their God in the church, the bread of communion was left out. It's a wafer. It was left out for months, and it would develop these red spots Now we know today it's mold. But they would say that the Jews came in the middle of the night and they beat the body of their God. So that's why this red stuff is blood. And they would also accuse the Jewish people of sacrilegious whatever. And good morning, Cookie. And they would then go out and annihilate the Jewish people, God forbid, before Pesach. So the Maharal of Prague created this Frankenstein concept, this humanoid called the golem. The golem of Prague, which till today is resting in the attic, which is blocked up and sealed, the attic of the Altneu Shul. So the Maharal was a great Kabbalist, to say the least. He created this humanoid thing. Anyways, Maharal explains, his teachings are always very, very profound. He actually is my 16th grandfather. My ninth grandfather is the Alter Rebbe, the first Chabad Rebbe, and his 7th grandfather was the Maharal of Prague. So my 16th grandfather would be the Maharal. This is nice connecting with him, with my Zayda. So the Maharal explains that designating a place for prayer shows that one's prayer is not haphazard, but rather a fixed part of one's life, of one's daily service of God. This is important because the essence of prayer is connecting with God. If a connection is to be strong and lasting, it cannot derive from a casual, haphazard practice, one that takes place here today and somewhere else tomorrow. It must derive from a fixed, deeply entrenched practice, one that requires a designated place to perform properly. This concept, my friends, is connected closely to the concept of the trust in God that we spoke about at the beginning of this lesson. Our relationship with God is real. And just like when a human being, when you're appealing to a human being, when you're trying to connect with your wife, let's say, imagine you're talking to her, was distracted, and imagine you're talking to your wife like this the whole time. It would be insulting. In the same way, when you talk to God and you're distracted, it's insulting. You talk to God like a mensch. You speak clearly to God. It was Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai on his deathbed. Tells the students, great Roman era Talmudic scholar who saved Judaism. I wrote about him in my Friday email this week. He said to his students on his deathbed, may it be, when they asked for a final blessing, he blessed the students, may your fear of God be as great as your fear of human beings. May your fear of God be as great as your fear of human beings. They were like, Rebbe, don't you mean it backwards? And he said, no. If only you would treat God with as much respect as you treat a fellow human being, that would be good. When you speak to a human being, you look them in the eye, and you don't speak to them like, you speak to them word by word. So to imagine you spoke to God like that, instead of mumbling words to them like we sometimes do in prayer, you speak to them respectfully, slowly, one word at a time. Right? When I'm talking to God, I don't like to talk to anybody else in the middle, just like I wouldn't do with a normal human being. And he said, just like you wouldn't do a sin when somebody else is in the room, so too, if you knew that God is in the room, you also wouldn't do a sin. So when we have a set place for prayer, it means that you're talking to God in a clear way, in a nice way, without disrespect. That's how you should be talking to God. Reb Chaim Friedlander, and that's why, again, if you just joined us, I want you to know, even if you're not davening at shul you should definitely have a seat, which is your seat, that you always go to. But even if you're not davening at shul, you're davening at home, you should have a set place where you daven. If it's on the balcony, if it's by the wall, if it's in whatever it is that you daven, it should be a set place. That is my davening place. And you sanctify that place by making it a place for davening. Rabbi Chaim Friedlander elaborates, prayer is a means of connecting with God. Such a connection involves recognizing the nature of one's relationship with God, a relationship of complete dependence on God and subservience to Him. In fact, the word tefillah derives from the Hebrew word meaning judgment. There is a Hebrew word which means judgment, thus indicating that praying, lehit palel, which means to pray or to judge, is an exercise of self-judgment, the judgment of one's worthiness for God's kindness in accordance with one's feeling of dependence on God and his refusal to attribute any success to his own abilities. It's a sense of reliance on God. Okay, that's good. This awareness of one's relationship with God must be continually reinforced so that it may translate into a permanent attitude of self-negation before the greatness of one's master and provider. To allow such a permanent attitude to take root, one must be consistent and persistent in his prayer, a goal that is reached partly by setting a fixed place for an exercise that should be an anchor for his spiritual development. Folks, 1 second. Amazon is here. Just give me a quick second. I'm here alone. I'll be right back. Phew. The excitement of the quarantine, being here alone and having to open the door is cool. But thank you for your patience and understanding. Okay, so moving it along over here, what he's saying is basically the concept that he's saying here, this Reb Chaim Friedlander, is that approaching God in prayer is an attitude of humility before God. You know, there's a very powerful principle that that God can handle any human attitude except for one, which is arrogance. Humility is the lightning rod that draws God's blessing upon us, and arrogance is that which repels God's presence more than anything else. So when you approach God in an attitude of humility, you are drawing that blessing upon you in light speed, in whatever, Godspeed. Now, you'll notice this is why when we daven, we bow. You'll notice that when we do the Amidah, we put our feet together, we stand in humility before God. It's an attitude that is projected in our whole manner of prayer. And therefore, when you daven, if you're davening in the same place, you need to get into that zone, into that frame of mind. You're not just chatting like, hey, God, how you doing? What's up? It's not that kind of relationship. You've got to get into a mindset, into a frame of mind. And that's why a permanent place is considered so important, what we call a makom kavua, a permanent place. It's very, very important to be able to help us to reach that zone. You know how sometimes when you smell a certain smell, you're reminded of a certain person, for example, who always wears that perfume. Or when you have a certain experience, you have a flashback. Because we are human beings, we get programmed into certain ways. And I know when I wear a certain shirt, I feel like it reminds me of the person that gave it to me or a certain experience. So too, when we go to a certain place, we enter a certain frame of mind. By the way, this is the reason that we go 3 steps backwards before the Amidah and 3 steps forward to go into this new zone, right? Wherever we are. So that's what it's about. We human beings are creatures of habits. When you daven in a certain place, you not only spiritually sanctify that spot, but you also in your own mind familiarize yourself with that spot being conducive to meditation and to standing in the right attitude before God. Let's try to wrap this up over here. A person who adopts this mode of prayer is considered a disciple of Abraham, not simply on account of one small isolated practice of always returning to the same seat in the synagogue, but on account of allowing this practice to transform his entire spiritual character, to give new meaning to his prayers and lay the groundwork for an attitude toward life and a lasting connection with God. Having followed Abraham in the latter path of spiritual growth, one who sets a fixed place for prayer merits the same kind of heavenly assistance that was bestowed on Abraham in his time, and the God of Abraham will help him. When he dies, the Talmud says, this person will be eulogized as a humble and devout man, humble because of his self-negating connection with God, in which he recognizes that while powerless on his own, he lives and thrives only thanks to God's kindness and generosity, and devout because the trait of humility leads to devoutness. When humility takes one's ego and personal will out of the equation, one can concentrate on God's will and on seeking the ways to satisfy it fully. One final comment here from the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidism. Alternatively, the Baal Shem Tov taught that a person's location follows the thoughts of his mind. In a place where a person's thought is, that is where he is located. You can transport yourself based upon your thoughts. Very powerful teaching of the Baal Shem Tov. A person may be standing in the synagogue and uttering words of prayer, but if his mind drifts away and starts thinking about what is going on in the street or in the market, his entire being is considered to be in those mundane places. This then is what the Gemara means when it says setting a fixed place of prayer. Not only a physical place of prayer, but a person must keep his mind focused on prayer so that his being remains in one place throughout. He means mentally you're supposed to have a fixed place of prayer. That when you daven, you're going in the zone. By the way, this is the reason we put the talus over our head. When we put the talis over our head, we have like these blinders that you can only see the prayer book. And I'll put it even extra further over that I can focus only straight upon what's in front of me. I don't get distracted by what's around me when I daven, so that I can really, really get into that beautiful zone. For if he would allow his mind to wander, his place would not be fixed. And he would be at one point in the street, and another point in the market, and maybe sometimes he would also be in the synagogue. And that's the meaning that the Baal Shem Tov tells us of the importance of having a fixed place for prayer, not only a physical place, but also more importantly, a mental place of prayer. I just want to conclude with a beautiful story about a chassid by the name of, hey, Warren from the back of the bus, a chassid of the name of Reb Mendel Futterfass. Reb Mendel Futterfass was a Hasidic Jew. He lived in Russia, and he was exiled to Siberia for the crime of teaching Torah in public. He was a chassid of the Rebbe and of the previous Rebbe. At one point, he found himself in Siberia for like 10 years of hard labor in the Gulag, in the Russian frozen wastelands, in the forced labor camps. Long story short, he had a deep desire to have a private audience with the Rebbe, but he couldn't. I mean, he was in Russia. He was a 24-hour train ride from any normal civilization. There was no way to escape. So what he did was he closed his eyes and he walked himself through the spiritual preparation that he would have done had he been near the Rebbe. You know, he prepared himself about going to the mikvah and davening and meditating and, putting on his gartel and wearing his Shabbos clothes and then, preparing himself for a private audience with the Rebbe. And then he walked in his own mind, all in his own mind. He was probably in a prison cell or something. And he walked himself through the process of coming to the Rebbe. And there he envisioned himself standing in front of the Rebbe and giving the Rebbe his note with his questions. And he envisioned the Rebbe answering him. And he went through the whole process. Fast forward 10 years. When he came out of Russia, and he finally was able to stand before the Rebbe, in an amazing turn of events, the Rebbe turned the conversation to each item that was on that list of questions that he had asked the Rebbe in his mind's eye. Very powerful, very, very powerful concept here, that the Rebbe was kind of answering his questions 10 years later, sort of validating the transportation of himself in his mind's eye from Russia to where he was. There's actually another interesting story. There was a very famous Sephardic Kabbalist by the name of the Baba Sali. His real name is Rabbi Yisrael Abu Chatzera, Rabbi Yisrael of the carpet, which I think it's in Arabic, Abu Chatzera, or maybe in Aramaic means the carpet, because this guy, his ancestor had a story with a magic carpet. That's actually where it comes from. The magic carpet story comes from this Abu Chatzera family. They're a family of Sephardic Kabbalists. When one of them needed to go hundreds of years ago, he needed to go to Israel and he couldn't afford the ship's fare. So the story goes that he said to the captain, listen, if you want to let me on the boat, then I'll just follow you. He followed him on this magic carpet. And ever since then, the family has been called Abu Chatzera, the master of the carpet. Very Kabbalistic, to say the least. So anyways, what happened here is that Rabbi Yisrael Abu Chatzera, the Baba Sali as he's known, he lived in Ashdod. And at one point, somebody came to the Rebbe for dollars. And he said to the Rebbe, I'm going to Ashdod, to Israel. So the Rebbe said, send my regards to the Baba Sali. The guy comes to the Baba Sali a few days later, and he says, I have regards to you from the Rebbe. So the Baba Sali says, I saw him last night. We study every Wednesday evening. Now, this is obviously before FaceTime and Facebook Live. So whatever that means, that they would study every Wednesday evening, the Rebbe and the Baba Sali, sounds amazing. Point is, what the Baal Shem Tov is telling us, you are where your mind is. The question I want to leave you with today is, where is your mind? Where do you live? Do you live at work? Do you live in the Holy Land? Do you live in a dark place? Or do you live in a beautiful place filled with light, love, faith, and trust in God? The question is only one that you can answer. Folks, as mentioned earlier, through this quarantine, I want to respect your time and thank you for joining me for Torah study. So we do daily a regimen of 3 sessions. We study. The first session is Gates of Trust, 25 minutes. Second session is Talmud for 25 minutes. And the third session is Introduction to Jewish Spirituality and Meditation through prayer for 25 minutes. If you haven't done so already, I'd like to ask you please to like our YouTube page. Sorry, to subscribe to our YouTube page, because once we reach 100 YouTube subscribers, we get benefits from YouTube. For example, to allow us to make a very easy link to let people see us on YouTube. For example, youtube.com/Jewish Gardens will be ours once we hit 100 subscribers. So if you can do so, take 5 seconds of your time, just go to YouTube, go to Chabad Palm Beach Gardens and click subscribe, the big red button on top, subscribe. And that way we're very close. I think we're at 75 right now. If we could just hit 100, it would make it a lot easier for us to share Torah study here through YouTube. And that way I want you to know that you can actually follow. We're going to be uploading the various classes of Talmud, of Gates of Trust, and of spirituality and meditation through prayer to our playlists on YouTube. So that way you'll be able to see all the classes that you missed all in one place. So for if you don't mind, just please click the subscribe link on the YouTube page of Chabad Palm Beach Gardens. That's Chabad Palm Beach Gardens on YouTube. I'm going to sign off right now so that I can re-sign up in 2 seconds. I'm going to go straight back on so that by 10 o'clock we could be finished that Torah study. That way every day, we start at 8:30 sharp, hopefully Jewish time. And then we finish at 10 o'clock. So we have 3 sessions of 25 minutes each, roughly. And that way you can know that this hour and a half is an hour and a half of Torah study, and you can go on with your day. I don't want to be endlessly teaching Torah here because it's not respectful of your time. So with that, I'm going to sign off, and thank you again for joining me very, very much here this morning. We'll be right back just in 2 seconds. Don't go away with the introduction to Jewish spirituality and meditation through prayer coming up right now.